My name is Nour. It means light in Arabic. My father chose that name for me himself. He told me the story many times when I was small. He said he held me for the first time and looked at my face and said, "This child is going to illuminate something." He was a man of faith, a man of poetry, a man who believed deeply in signs and meanings. He named me Light. I have thought about that a great deal over the past few years. The name he gave me, the light he thought I would carry, and what happened when the light I found turned out to be different from the light he had in mind. This is the hardest story I have ever tried to tell, not because the events are too dark to speak about, though some of them are, but because the people in it are people I love. My father is not a villain. My mother is not a monster. My brothers are not my enemies. They are my family. They are the people who shaped me, who held me, who taught me the first words I ever knew for God. And what I have to tell you happened in the middle of all of that love, which is what makes it so complicated, and so important, and so impossible to reduce to something simple. So let me start at the beginning, and I ask you, whoever you are, wherever you are watching from, I ask you to stay with me, because this story does not end where you might expect it to end. I was born in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, in 1997. My father was, and still is, a senior Islamic scholar and the director of one of the larger mosques in our district of the city. This is not a small thing to say. In Saudi Arabia, especially in Riyadh, a man in my father's position occupies a particular kind of social and spiritual authority. People came to our home for counsel. Students came to study with him. Government officials consulted him on matters of religious law. My father's opinion on Islamic questions carried weight that extended far beyond our family. He was respected. He was admired. He was, in the world we inhabited, a very important man. And he was also, at home, a genuinely loving father. I want to be clear about this because I think it is important, and because I think people sometimes assume that a man with my father's beliefs must have been cold, or harsh, or cruel at home. He was not. He was warm. He told stories. He had a loud, genuine laugh that filled the whole house. He brought home sweets on Fridays. He sat with us in the evenings and asked us about our days and listened, actually listened, to what we said. He prayed with us and for us, with what I can only describe as genuine tenderness. He loved us. He loves us. I have never doubted that for a single moment, even in the worst of what happened between us. But my father's love came wrapped in a very specific and very complete worldview. And within that worldview, there was very little room for questions that moved outside its edges. Islam was not just the truth. It was the only truth, the complete truth, the framework within which all of reality was correctly understood. The Quran was the direct, perfect, unalterable word of God. The Prophet Muhammad was the seal of all prophets, the final and complete messenger. The life of a righteous Muslim woman, modest, obedient to God and to her family's guidance, devoted to prayer and to the home, protected from the corrupting influences of a world that had gone badly wrong. That life was not a limitation. It was a gift, a protection, a path to paradise. I was taught this not as doctrine, but as love. My father taught me to love Islam the way you love the home you were born into, not because you chose it, but because it is where you are from, because it is in the walls and the smell of the kitchen and the voice of the person who held you when you were small. I did not question it for a very long time. I did not know how. I was the only girl among 4 children. I had 3 brothers. In our household, this meant certain things. My brothers had freedoms I did not have, to move through the city more independently, to have conversations and relationships with a wider world, to eventually go to university abroad. My world was smaller and more carefully managed. I was educated at a girls' school, then at a women's university in Riyadh. I wore abaya and niqab in public from a young age without complaint. It was simply what was done, what was right, what was expected, and I had no framework yet to experience it as anything other than normal. My universe had a particular shape, and I lived inside it, and it was all I had ever known. I was not unhappy, exactly, but I was, and I understand this now in a way I could not have articulated then. I was lonely, in a very specific way, lonely inside certainty. Does that make sense? I had answers to every question I was permitted to ask, but there were questions I was not permitted to ask, and the not asking of them created a particular kind of interior silence that I mistook for peace for a very long time. The first crack appeared when I was 19. I was studying Arabic literature at university in Riyadh. I loved literature, deeply, genuinely, in a way that felt like one of the realest things about me. Stories, words, the way language could reach into something true and hold it up to the light. This love of literature was, in a way, the beginning of everything. Because literature, real literature, the kind that reaches for the full range of human experience, does not stay inside approved boundaries. It goes where truth goes. And truth, I was beginning to discover, was not always where I had been told it was. I had a professor, a woman, older, careful in the way that people who have navigated this world for a long time are careful, who introduced us to a range of classical and contemporary Arabic texts. Some of them pushed at edges I had not noticed before. Some of them described human experiences, longing, doubt, the search for God in unexpected places, that resonated with something in me that I had not known was there waiting to resonate. One afternoon, she read us a poem by a Lebanese Christian poet. I cannot remember now which poem it was, or who wrote it exactly, but I remember the feeling it produced, a feeling of, there is something here, something real, something I have not been given permission to look at directly, but that is real. I did not immediately go looking for Christianity. That is not how it happened. What happened first was that I began, very quietly and very carefully, to look at things I had not looked at before. I had a smartphone. This was 2016, and I had learned, the way young people in Saudi Arabia learn, to use a VPN to access content that was blocked by the country's filtering systems. Not for anything dangerous or forbidden. At first, just for YouTube videos, for music, for things my friends shared and laughed about. But then, gradually, for other things. For questions I had started to have. For the quiet voice that had been there for years, underneath the prayers, asking, is there more than this? I began to watch interviews with former Muslims who had left Islam. This was terrifying. I want you to understand how terrifying this was. Not just because of the legal and social consequences of apostasy in Saudi Arabia, though those are severe and real, but because of what it felt like internally. I had been taught that to even entertain these questions was dangerous to my soul, that doubt was the enemy's weapon, that the person who began to question was already being pulled toward destruction. So every time I watched one of these videos, there was a part of me that felt like I was doing something that could cost me everything, not just in this world, but in the next. But I kept watching. Because the people I was watching, the ones who had left, who were telling their stories from wherever they had ended up, they did not look destroyed. They looked, many of them, remarkably like the thing I had been reaching for without knowing how to name it. They looked like people who had found something real. And then, one night, I watched a video by an Iranian woman, a convert from Islam to Christianity, who talked about reading the Bible for the first time and encountering Jesus in the Gospels. And she said something that I have never forgotten. She said, I had been given a God who required everything and guaranteed nothing, and then I found a God who gave everything and required only that I receive it. I watched that video 3 times, and then I sat in the dark of my bedroom in my family's house in Riyadh, in the house where my father's books of Islamic scholarship lined every wall, where the call to prayer had been the rhythm of my entire life, and I thought, I need to read what she read. I downloaded a Bible app. I hid it in a folder on my phone labeled with the name of a homework application, and I began to read the Gospel of John. I need to try to tell you what reading the Gospel of John was like for me. I have tried to describe it before, and it always feels insufficient. Language does not quite reach the place where this happened, but let me try. I was a girl who had grown up in a tradition that spoke constantly about God, about His greatness, His power, His commands, His judgments, His rewards and punishments. God was the center of everything in my world. And yet somehow, in all of that, God had never felt close to me. He felt vast and demanding and watchful. He felt like a presence that you had to constantly perform correctly for, a presence that was always assessing whether you were enough. I prayed 5 times a day, every day, and I never, not once, not in a single prayer in my entire life, felt like I was speaking to someone who was glad I was there. And then I read John chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. I had read things like this before, grand cosmic openings, but I kept reading. I got to John chapter 3, the conversation between Jesus and Nicodemus at night. And Jesus says, For God so loved the world that He gave His only Son, so that everyone who believes in Him will not perish, but have eternal life. For God did not send His Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through Him. I read that sentence several times. God did not send his Son to condemn the world, to save it, not to judge it first and save only the ones who performed correctly, to save it, all of it, the whole broken, confused, failing, searching world. I kept reading. I got to John chapter 4, Jesus at the well with a Samaritan woman. Everything about this encounter was scandalous by the standards of his time. A Jewish man speaking alone with a Samaritan woman, a woman with a complicated personal history, in public. And he doesn't begin by listing her failures. He asks her for water. He starts with her need. He treats her as someone worth talking to, worth the full attention of a real conversation. And when she realizes who he is, she runs back to her village and tells everyone. This woman who had been living with shame becomes the first evangelist in the Gospel of John. Jesus chose her. He chose the one that everyone else had written off. I read John chapter 8. The woman caught in adultery. Let him who is without sin cast the first stone. The crowd disperses. Jesus stands alone with the woman. Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. He gives her both mercy and dignity, both freedom and direction, not one without the other. Not forgiveness without truth, but not truth without forgiveness either. And I read John chapter 11. Lazarus has died. Jesus arrives too late, or what looks like too late. And Mary, Lazarus' sister, falls at his feet weeping. And the text says, the text that I have now read hundreds of times and that still stops me every single time. When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews also weeping which came with her, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. And then, 2 verses later, Jesus wept. Jesus wept. The one who was about to raise the dead, who knew the end of the story, who had the power to change everything. He did not bypass the grief. He stood in it. He let it touch him. He wept with the people who were weeping. I put my phone down. It was past midnight. The house was silent. The call to Fajr prayer was still hours away. And I lay on my bed in the dark, and I thought, this is the God I have been looking for. This is the one who weeps with you. This is the one who asks the shamed woman for water before he offers her anything. This is the one who does not stand at a distance and send requirements. This is the one who comes down, who enters the grief, who chooses the outcast, who wept. And I did something I had never done in my life. I put aside every formal phrase, every Arabic prayer formula, every posture and ritual I had been taught, and I spoke, in Saudi Arabic, quietly in the dark, to this Jesus I had just met. I said, I don't know if you are who they say you are, but if you are, if this is real, I want to know you. I want the God who weeps. I want the God who runs. Please show me if you are real. I was terrified. I was 20 years old. I was alone in my bedroom in Riyadh. And I had just crossed a line that, in my world, had no clear way back. What I want you to understand about the next 2 years of my life is that every single day was a performance. Not the kind of performance you choose, the kind you have no choice about if you want to survive. Every morning I woke up and became the person my family needed me to be. I prayed. I fasted when the time came. I wore my abaya and niqab when I went outside. I sat at the dinner table and listened to my father discuss Islamic jurisprudence and nodded in the right places. I was a good daughter. I was a modest young woman. I was my father's pride. And privately, at night, on my phone with the brightness turned down low, I was becoming someone entirely different. Or perhaps more accurately, I was becoming for the first time myself. I found an online community of Arab Christians and Muslim background believers. Many of them were women. Many of them were in situations similar to mine, living in households where their faith had to be invisible, navigating families that would have been devastated to know the truth. We communicated carefully, on platforms that were relatively secure, using screen names, never sharing identifying information. But inside that community I found something I had never had before. People who understood. People who knew exactly what it felt like to pray in private in a language your family didn't know, to carry a faith that could not be spoken out loud, to love people who would feel betrayed if they knew what you believed. These women, and some men too, but mostly women in my experience, these people became my real community, my real church, in a way, even though we never gathered in a physical space. We prayed together online. We read scripture together. We shared our struggles and our fears, and our small moments of unexpected joy. One woman in Egypt, who had been a Christian in secret for 4 years, became something like an older sister to me. She had already paid enormous costs. She had lost her first engagement when her faith was discovered, had been thrown out of her family home for a year before a partial reconciliation. She was not soft about what this path cost, but she was also the most joyful person I had encountered in my entire life. Her joy was not circumstantial. It did not depend on her circumstances being good, because her circumstances were often not good. It was something underneath the circumstances, something that remained when everything else was taken away. I wanted that. I was building that, slowly, quietly, in the hidden interior of my life. But the thing about living a double life is that it is exhausting in ways that are hard to describe. Not just the practical vigilance, the constant awareness of what you have open on your phone, the careful management of your expressions when topics come up at the dinner table, the way you have to think 3 steps ahead of every conversation to make sure nothing slips. That is exhausting enough. But there is also the emotional weight of loving people you are deceiving, even when you know the deception is necessary, even when you know that telling the truth would not go well. The fact of it, loving your mother and hiding the most important thing in your life from her, that is a particular kind of pain that does not go away just because it is necessary. My mother noticed things, even when she didn't know what she was noticing. She would look at me sometimes with a concern in her eyes that she didn't put into words. Once, I was 21, and I had been a secret Christian for about a year by this point. She found me in the kitchen early in the morning, sitting alone, and she sat across from me and said, "Nour, something is different about you. I don't know what it is, but something is different. You seem farther away." And she reached across the table and took my hand, and just held it. I nearly told her that morning. I was so close. The truth was right there at the surface. But I looked at my mother's face, her careful, loving, frightened face, and I thought about my father in the next room, and about my brothers, and about what the truth would release into this house. And I said, "I'm fine, Mama. I'm just tired." And she looked at me for a long moment as if she didn't entirely believe me. And then she squeezed my hand and let it go. I have thought about that kitchen table moment many times since, the moment I almost crossed from hiding into honesty. And I wonder, sometimes, what would have happened if I had. Whether some of what came later would have been different. I don't know. I will never know. You cannot go back and run the other version of events to see how it would have turned out. What I know is that I kept the secret, and the secret grew, and the world around it, the world of my family, my father's mosque, the arranged marriage conversations that had begun to happen, the future that was being built for me inside the walls of my community, that world kept moving too. And eventually, inevitably, those two things came into collision. I need to talk about the marriage question, because it is central to what happened next, and because I think it is something that many women in situations like mine have faced, and that deserves to be spoken about, honestly. In my community, in the world of my father and his social circle and the mosque and the extended network of families that formed our world, marriage was not merely a personal decision. It was a family matter, a religious matter, a social matter. A young woman did not simply meet someone and decide to build a life with him. There were processes, introductions through family channels, meetings conducted within proper frameworks, agreements between families, and the man being proposed was, of course, always a Muslim, a practicing Muslim, ideally from a good family, ideally with a strong religious foundation. It was not possible to imagine any alternative. There was no alternative inside the world I inhabited. When I was 22, a proposal began to be discussed. A family in our social network had a son, 26 years old, educated, from a family that my father respected deeply, himself a man of sincere Islamic conviction. My father thought well of him. My mother liked his family. My brothers said positive things. The conversations began, as they do in this context, without my direct participation. Between families first, and only later, would I be formally introduced and given the opportunity to say whether I found the prospect acceptable. I sat with this for weeks, because the question was not just, do I find this particular man acceptable? The question was, can I marry anyone in the framework my community provides, given what I now believe? Can I enter a marriage as a Muslim wife, performing the roles and the rituals that would be expected of me, living as a Muslim in a Muslim household, raising children as Muslims? Can I do that while carrying what I carry? Can I build an entire life on a foundation that requires this level of deception, this level of performance? The answer, when I sat with it honestly, was no. I could not. Not because I didn't want to be married, not because I didn't want a family, not because I had any specific objection to the man being proposed, but because to marry within this system would be to lock myself into a permanent double life from which there would be no exit. And I had already been living a double life for 2 years, and I knew its cost, and I could not sentence myself to it forever. I had to find a way out. Not just of this marriage proposal, out of the entire trajectory that my life was on. This is when things accelerated, and this is when everything became genuinely dangerous. I have gone back and forth about how much detail to share about how I was discovered, because there are people involved whose situations are sensitive, and whose safety matters to me even now. What I will tell you is that it happened through my phone. Not because I had been careless. I had been very careful, but because the tools available to monitor the digital lives of women in households like mine in Saudi Arabia in 2019 were more extensive and more sophisticated than I had fully accounted for. My father, acting, I believe, out of genuine worry rather than malice, because he had noticed the same things my mother had noticed, the same farther away quality, had a way of seeing more than I knew. What he found was not everything. He found enough. He found evidence that I had been accessing Christian content, Bible passages, that online community I had been part of, conversations, prayers. He did not find it all, and I don't think he understood immediately the full extent of what he was seeing. But he understood enough to know that something had gone very wrong, by his definition, with his daughter. The night he confronted me, I was called into his study. This was the room that was most fully his. Books from floor to ceiling, the smell of old paper and oud, a large desk that had always felt like a kind of altar of authority when I was a child. He was sitting behind that desk when I came in. He did not look angry at first. He looked, and this was harder to see than anger would have been. He looked frightened. He looked like a man who was afraid of what he was about to hear. He showed me what he had found. He asked me, his voice very controlled, very quiet, to explain. I made a choice in that moment that I have sometimes second-guessed and sometimes been certain about. I could have deflected. I could have invented an explanation, claimed it was research, claimed someone else had used my phone, constructed a story that would have bought me time. I was a good enough performer by that point that I might have gotten away with it. But something in my father's face, that frightened, searching, desperate face, something in it made performance impossible. He was not looking at me as a security threat. He was looking at me as his child, who he was afraid was lost. And I could not lie to that face. I told him the truth. Not all of it. Not immediately. It came in pieces over the course of a very long and very painful conversation that went late into the night. But I told him the essential truth. I had been reading the Bible. I had come to believe that Jesus was who he claimed to be. I was a Christian. The silence after I said that, the silence in my father's study with all his books on the walls, that silence is the loudest thing I have ever experienced. And then my father, the scholar, the mosque director, the man who had named me Light and held me when I was born and wept with pride over his children. My father put his face in his hands, and he wept, not with anger, not yet, with grief. He wept like a man who has just received news of a death. What followed was, there is no gentle way to put this, one of the hardest seasons of my life, and I want to be honest about it without sensationalizing it and without minimizing it, because both of those distortions would be a disservice to what actually happened. My father did not throw me out that night. He did not call the authorities. He did not do the most extreme things that are sometimes done in situations like this in contexts like mine. I believe, that his love for me was in genuine conflict with the demands of his convictions and his position, and that conflict held him back from the most immediate and drastic responses. But the house became something I had never experienced before, cold in ways it had never been cold. My mother avoided my eyes. My brothers, who had been told separately by my father, treated me with a mixture of anger and confusion, and something that in the eldest looked uncomfortably like disgust. Mealtimes became performances of silence. My father and I did not speak for 2 weeks after that first night. When he did finally speak to me again, it was to begin a series of sessions that he clearly intended as a correction. Conversations in which he brought his full scholarly knowledge to bear on the questions I had been sitting with. Counter-arguments for everything I had come to believe. Theological challenges. Emotional appeals. Recitations of what I would lose if I did not come back. I sat through all of it. I listened to all of it. Because I loved my father, and because some of what he said was intellectually serious and deserved to be heard. I engaged with it honestly, and I told him, as gently and as directly as I could, that I had considered these questions. that I had not arrived at my faith lightly or carelessly, that what I had found was not a rebellion or a phase or a Western corruption of my thinking, that what I had found was real to me in ways that I could not unfind. He brought in 2 senior scholars from his network to speak with me. These were conversations that were deeply uncomfortable, not because the men were cruel, but because they were thorough, and they were certain, and they were speaking from within a framework that had no room for the possibility that I might simply be right. I was the problem to be corrected. I was the deviation to be returned to the correct path. My experience, the prayers in the dark, the Gospel of John, the Jesus who wept, none of that was data in their framework. It was error. It was deception. It was the enemy's work. My phone was taken from me. My laptop was taken. My access to the outside world narrowed significantly. I was effectively, and I want to use this word carefully and accurately, I was effectively confined, not in a locked room, but in a house that had become a closed system, with my movement outside it controlled and monitored, with no device that could connect me to the community I had built or the resources I had relied on. This period lasted 4 months, 4 months of isolation, 4 months of my father alternating between grief and pressure and occasional anger, 4 months of my mother's careful, pained, silent face, 4 months of sleeping in the bedroom I had grown up in the house I had grown up in, surrounded by a family I loved, and feeling more alone than I had felt in my life. I prayed in the dark. I had no Bible. My phone was gone. But I had, by that point, read enough that I could go back through what I had memorized. I went through the Gospel of John in my head, passage by passage, the woman at the well, the woman in the crowd, Lazarus in the tomb, the upper room, the cross. It is finished, the garden, Mary Magdalene thinking he was the gardener. The moment he said her name and she recognized him. He said her name, Mary, and she knew him. I am Mary, I thought, more than once in those 4 months, looking for him in the dark, thinking maybe I had been wrong, maybe I had imagined it, maybe this whole thing was a mistake. And then, that stillness, that warmth, that presence that does not leave even when all the external confirmations are taken away. It did not leave. Through 4 months of isolation in my father's house, it did not leave. That was the most convincing theological argument I encountered during that entire period. Not any of the scholars' counter-arguments. Not my father's knowledge and passion. The fact that what I had found did not go away when everything was taken from me. That was the argument that settled me. I want to stop here because I think there might be a woman watching this, maybe many women, who know exactly what I am describing. Not necessarily in Saudi Arabia. Maybe somewhere else entirely. Maybe not even in a Muslim context. Maybe in any context where your faith has made you different from your family in ways that have cost you something. That experience of loving people and being unknown to them. That loneliness inside family. If that's you, I see you. I want you to know, what you are carrying is real and it is heavy and you are not carrying it alone. Please leave a comment. Tell me where you are. Not your name, not details that put you at risk. Just, I'm here. I hear you. We are here together. Keep watching. I have more to tell you. I am going to be careful here about the details, for the same reasons I mentioned before, but I want to give you enough to understand what happened. During those 4 months of isolation, there was one thread of connection to the outside world that remained, not through any device, but through a woman, a domestic worker in our household, a woman from the Philippines who had worked for my family for several years, and who, as it turned out, was a Christian herself. She was not someone I had ever had a deep relationship with. In the social structure of my world, the boundaries between family and household staff were clear and rarely crossed. But she noticed things. She had been in the house long enough to watch what was happening. And one afternoon, when we were briefly alone, she pressed a small folded piece of paper into my hand without a word and walked away. On the paper was a phone number and 2 words, call collect. It took me 3 more weeks to find a way to make that call safely. I will not describe how I managed it. What I will tell you is that the number connected me to a network, an organization that specifically existed to help people in situations like mine, people of Muslim background in high-risk countries who needed to leave. They were careful, experienced, and kind. Over the following weeks, through communications that were slow and indirect and required enormous patience, a plan was made. I left on a Tuesday morning in March. I was 23 years old. I was wearing my abaya and niqab as I always did when I left the house. I had a small bag inside my abaya, a single change of clothes, my identification documents, a small amount of cash. I had told my family I had a medical appointment. My mother had offered to come with me, and I had said no, it was fine. The driver would take me. I did not go to the medical appointment. I went to a location I had been given. And from that location, the process began that eventually, through steps I will not describe, brought me to Canada. Leaving was the most violent thing I have ever done to myself. Not physically violent. Physically, it was anticlimactic. Just a series of movements and vehicles and waiting rooms. Violent in the sense that it felt like tearing, like leaving a part of yourself behind in a house on a street in Riyadh where a woman called Nour used to live. I thought about my mother constantly during those first hours. Her face when she thought I was just going to a medical appointment. The way she had looked at me the morning before with no knowledge that it was the last time she would see me in that house. I thought about my father in his study with his books. I thought about the call to prayer I had heard every day of my life. I thought about the smell of the kitchen in the evening. I thought about everything I was leaving, and I let myself grieve it. Because I believe grief has to be felt. It cannot just be pushed through. And I kept moving. I arrived in Canada in April of that year. A cold April. I had never experienced cold like that. I stood outside the airport in my first moments on Canadian soil, and I breathed air that was so cold it felt sharp in my lungs. And I thought, I am free. And I had absolutely no idea yet what to do with that. Freedom, it turns out, is not a simple thing, especially when you have never had it before, especially when it came at the price of the people you love. My first months in Canada were, in practical terms, supported by the organization that had helped me leave. I had housing, I had resources, I had people who were helping me navigate the refugee and asylum process. I had a community of other displaced people at various stages of the same kind of journey. I was not alone in the structural sense, but I was, in the deepest sense, profoundly disoriented. Every single reference point I had ever used to understand myself had been built in a context that no longer surrounded me. In Saudi Arabia, I knew who I was by the structures around me. Daughter of this family, student at this university, member of this community, believer of these specific things in these specific ways. Even the faith I had found in secret had been formed partly in reaction to and in relationship with that context. And now the context was gone, and I had to figure out who I was when none of those structures were holding me in place. This was disorienting in ways I hadn't anticipated. I had thought, without articulating it clearly, that leaving would feel like relief, and there was relief, real relief. The end of the performance, the end of the double life, the ability to be one person in all settings. That relief was genuine and significant. But alongside the relief was a grief that did not announce itself in advance. Grief for my family. Grief for my language as the language of everyday life around me. Grief for Ramadan, which I had always found beautiful even after I could no longer participate in it as a believer. Grief for the call to prayer. Grief for home. I found a church in Toronto. A church with a significant community of people from Arab and Iranian and Afghan and Pakistani backgrounds. Many of them converts from Islam. Many of them people who had made the same kind of journey I had made. The first time I walked in and heard Arabic being sung in worship, not Islamic worship, but Christian worship, songs to Jesus in the language I had grown up thinking was God's own language. I stood in the entrance of that church, and I could not move for a moment. The language of my childhood, the language my father had used to recite the Quran to me when I was small, being used now for this, for these songs about a Jesus who is alive, who is present, who is the light, my name. I thought about what my father had said when he named me. This child is going to illuminate something. Maybe, I thought, maybe he was right, just not the illumination he had in mind. I was baptized 6 months after arriving in Canada. It was a small ceremony, just the pastor and a few members of the community who had become friends. No family, no one who had known me before. I stood in the water, and I thought about all the water that had flowed between the girl I was and the woman standing there. And I thought about Jesus at the Jordan with John. And I went under and came up, and I was new, and I was old, and I was exactly myself, and I was more myself than I had ever been. And then I allowed myself to begin to think about my mother. I want to tell you about the letter, because the letter is part of how this story becomes different from how you might expect it to end. About 8 months after arriving in Canada, I wrote a letter to my mother, not to my father. I was not ready for that, and I was not sure he was ready for it either. To my mother, the woman who had held my hand across the kitchen table and said, "You seem farther away." The woman who had seen something she couldn't name. The woman who, of all the people in my family, had always been the one I felt most seen by, even inside the limits of what she was permitted to know. The letter was the hardest thing I have ever written. I wrote it, and deleted it, and started again more times than I can count. I did not know what to say. I did not know what to aim for. I was not writing to convince her of anything. I had no illusions that a letter would transform her understanding or her faith. I was not writing to justify myself to her, because I had learned by then that the need for justification is a form of self-protection that doesn't actually help anyone. I was writing because she was my mother, because I loved her, because the silence between us, her not knowing where I was, me not knowing how she was, that silence was eating something in me. I wrote, "Mama, I am alive. I am in a safe place. I am well. I am at peace in a way I have not been for a long time, and I wanted you to know that. I know you don't understand what has happened. I know this has hurt you and Baba and the family in ways that I grieve every day. I am not asking you to agree with me. I am not asking you to understand. I am asking you to know that your daughter is alive and safe, and that she loves you. She has always loved you. She will always love you. Whatever else has happened, that has not changed." I sent the letter through a third party, a woman in the network I was connected to who had ways of getting things to people in Saudi Arabia, without creating records that would put anyone in danger. I did not expect a response. I thought perhaps it would help my mother know I was alive. I thought perhaps it would make the silence a little less total. I did not expect anything more than that. 3 months later, I received a message. Through the same third party. It was not a letter. It was a voice recording. 12 minutes long. My mother's voice. I will not describe in detail what she said, because some of it is hers and not mine to share. But I will tell you the shape of it. She was angry at first. The first few minutes were her anger, her pain, her grief at what had happened to the family, at what my leaving had done to my father, at how it had been explained to people in the community, at the shame of it. She said that. She named the shame. She was honest in a way that my mother rarely permitted herself to be, and hearing that honesty even in anger felt like a kind of intimacy. And then her voice changed, and she said, "But I want you to know that every night I pray for you, not for you to come back. I don't know if that is possible anymore. Just for you to be safe, for you to be at peace. I named you Nour. I have always believed that name meant something. I don't know what it means now, but I pray for you by it every night. My Nour." I listened to that recording sitting on the floor of my apartment in Toronto at 11 o'clock at night, and I wept. Not with grief, though there was grief in it, but with something I can only call gratitude. My mother was still speaking my name. She was still praying for me, across everything that had happened. The theology, the apostasy, the shame, the distance. She was still speaking my name to God every night. This is the part of my story that I was not expecting, that no version of the future I had imagined for myself had included, that I still sometimes think about with a kind of amazed disbelief that it actually happened. 14 months after I left Saudi Arabia, so about 16 months after my discovery and the confrontation with my father, my mother came to Canada, not to see me, officially. She was accompanying my youngest brother, who was beginning a university program in Toronto. This is one of those things that seems, in retrospect, too coincidental to be coincidental. My youngest brother, who of all my siblings had been the quietest and most careful in his response to what had happened, the one who had not condemned me loudly, who had simply been grieved. This brother had applied to a university program in Toronto, and my mother had come to help him settle. Whether my mother had any intention of contacting me when she came, I have never asked her directly. There are things between us that neither of us asks directly. What I know is that 10 days after she arrived in Toronto, I received a message through our mutual contact. My mother wanted to meet, without my father knowing, without my brothers knowing, just the two of us. I want to try to describe what it felt like to be getting on a subway in Toronto, to go to a coffee shop to meet my mother, whom I had not seen in 16 months, who did not know the full shape of my current life, who came from a world in which what I had done was a form of death. The fear, the longing, the absolute inability to predict what was going to happen. Whether she was going to hold me, or simply sit across from me at a safe distance and say what needed to be said before returning to her brother's house. Whether I would be able to speak at all when I saw her face. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table by the window, in Toronto in November, wearing a coat I didn't recognize, new, bought here perhaps, or brought from home, and a hijab, looking slightly out of place and completely like my mother, her hands around a cup of tea. watching the door. When I walked in, she saw me immediately. We looked at each other from across the coffee shop, and then she stood up, and I walked to her, and my mother held me. She held me for a long time. Neither of us spoke. She smelled like home, like the specific perfume she had worn my whole life, like the soap that had always been in the bathroom at the house in Riyadh. She held me, and I held her, and we were both crying, I think, though I was too focused on holding her to pay much attention to my own face. When we finally sat down, we had about 2 hours. 2 hours to find our way to each other across 16 months, and an unbridgeable theological divide, and a grief that had no clean resolution on either side. We did not pretend the divide wasn't there. We did not argue about it. We also did not resolve it. What we did, in those 2 hours, was something I think was more important than either resolution or argument. We were honest. For the first time in my life, I was completely honest with my mother. And she was, within the limits of who she is and what she can hold, she was honest back. She told me she did not understand what I believed. She told me she thought I was wrong. She told me that what I had done had broken something in my father that she did not know how to describe. She told me that she worried for me, not just in this life but in the next. And I want you to understand that this was her love, not a threat. This was a mother who genuinely believed I had chosen a path toward destruction, and who was terrified for me. And I told her what I believed, not as an argument, not defensively. I told her about the Gospel of John. I told her about the woman at the well. I told her about the Jesus who wept. I told her about the prayer in the dark in my bedroom in Riyadh when I was 20 years old, asking a God I wasn't sure was real to show me what was true. I told her that I had not found rebellion. I had found peace, real peace, not the performed peace of doing what was expected. Peace, like the bottom of a lake, that is still even when the surface is stormy. My mother listened to all of it. She did not agree with any of it, but she listened. And then she said something that I have held every single day since. She said, "Nour, I named you for the light because I believed God had something for you that I couldn't see yet. I still believe that. I don't know what it is, but I believe it, and I will not stop praying for you." I told her I pray for her too, every single day, and she reached across the table, like she had reached across the kitchen table in Riyadh, and she took my hand. And we sat there in a coffee shop in Toronto, a Muslim woman and her Christian daughter, holding hands across a table, while the November light came in through the window. That was not the ending of the story. My father does not know we met. My brothers do not know. The distance between me and my family is still real. The reconciliation is partial, fragile, unofficial. It exists in phone calls and messages that come through careful channels, in my mother's voice reaching me across the distance to say, "I'm praying for you, my Nour." It is not the whole restoration I sometimes dream of. It is not everyone around a table together in full knowledge and peace, but it is not nothing. It is a thread, and I hold it. I want to pause here and speak to you directly, because I know that somewhere watching this is a person who has lost someone to this story. Maybe you're the family member. Maybe you are the parent, or the sibling who is watching because someone you love has changed in a way you don't understand, and you are terrified for them. I want to speak to you, not just to the person on the same journey I was on, but to you. My mother could not agree with me. My mother did not understand, but my mother chose to love me anyway, and that choice, that reaching across the table, changed everything that was possible between us. If you have someone in your life who has gone somewhere you didn't expect them to go, please don't let the distance become total. Please don't let the last word be silence. You don't have to agree. You just have to reach. That's all. Just reach. Now let me finish. There's a little more I want to tell you. I am 27 years old. I have been in Canada for 4 years. I work, I study, I go to a church that has become something like a second family. I walk around Toronto without a hijab, in ordinary clothes, going ordinary places, having ordinary days. From the outside, my life looks like the life of any young immigrant woman building something new in a city that welcomes people from everywhere. On the inside, it is considerably more complex and considerably more rich than it looks, because I carry all of it with me. The house in Riyadh, my father's study, the call to prayer at dawn, the girl who recited Quran and made her mother proud, the girl who lay in the dark at 20 years old and asked a question she couldn't ask out loud, the woman who sat in a coffee shop in November and held her mother's hand. I carry all of that. It is not a burden I want to put down. It is the material from which my life is made. What I have learned about love, which is I think what this whole story is about, is that love is not the same thing as agreement. This is something I did not fully understand when I was young, in the world I grew up in, where love and agreement and obedience and belonging were all wound together into a single thing. To love someone meant to share their worldview. To love God meant to submit to His law. To be loved by your family meant to live within the boundaries they set. Love and sameness were the same thing. Jesus showed me something different. Jesus showed me a love that crosses distances that should not be crossable. A love that speaks to the woman at the well who is not of the right people, not of the right history, not of the right religion. A love that weeps with you where you are, rather than demanding you be somewhere else before it shows up. A love that says, even to the person who is running away, even to the child who has shamed the family, I see you. I know your name. I'm not going anywhere. My mother, in that coffee shop in Toronto, showed me that love too. Not a Christian love. She would not call it that. She would call it simply a mother's love. But it was the same shape. It was the love that reaches across the thing that separates, that takes the hand even when it doesn't understand the hand it's taking. I believe that love is what God is made of. I believe that the thing I encountered in the Gospel of John, that weeping, water-asking, stone-dropping love, is the truest picture of God that has ever been given to the world. And I believe that my mother, in a coffee shop in November, without knowing it, reflected that picture back to me. I told her I see Jesus in her. She said, "Don't be ridiculous." And then she smiled. The first time I had seen her smile in a year and a half, that smile. I could live on that smile for a long time. I want to speak specifically to the women who are watching this, because I know there is a particular shape to this experience for women that is different from the shape of it for men, and I don't want to gloss over that. In many Muslim-majority societies and communities, the risks of leaving Islam, or even of questioning it, are structured differently for women than for men. Women face restrictions on movement, on independence, on the ability to make unilateral decisions about their own lives, that men in the same contexts often do not face to the same degree. A woman's apostasy carries different social weight. A woman's departure from approved paths has different practical consequences in terms of marriage, family, housing, economic independence. If you are a woman in one of those situations, I want to say several things to you. First, your questions are legitimate. Whatever you have been told about women who question, whatever implications have been made about the character or the faith or the intelligence of women who cannot simply accept what they have been given, those implications are wrong. Questions are not a sign of weak faith. Questions are a sign of a mind that is alive and a heart that is searching for what is real. Honor your questions. Second, you are not alone. There are women who have walked exactly where you are walking. There are communities, online, international, careful, real, where women in situations like yours find each other and find resources and find the knowledge that you are not the only one. Please look for those communities. Please reach for them. The isolation that is imposed on women in your situation is one of the tools used to make the path seem impossibly difficult. It is not impossible. Other women have walked it. You can too. Third, if you are in a situation of genuine physical danger, if leaving your faith or even openly questioning it puts you at risk of violence or forced confinement or worse, please know that there are organizations specifically designed to help you. Organizations that have experience with exactly your situation, that have resources, that have networks. You do not have to figure out the path alone. Help exists. Reach for it. Use the comments section here if that feels like a safer first step than searching on your own. And fourth, and this is the most important thing, the God I found is not the exclusive property of Western women or liberated women or women who have the luxury of faith without cost. He is the God who saw Hagar in the wilderness when everyone else had left her there to die, and spoke to her. He called her by name. He asked her, "Where have you come from and where are you going?" He saw her, this outcast woman in the desert, the one with no rights and no protection. He saw her. He has always seen the ones that the structures of power make invisible. He sees you, right now, exactly where you are. I have not told you about my father, not fully. And I want to, because he is the most unresolved part of this story, and I think unresolved things deserve to be spoken about honestly, rather than tidied up with a neat conclusion. My father and I have not spoken directly since the night in his study, 4 years. I have sent messages through the channels I use to communicate with my mother, not letters to him exactly, but acknowledgments that he exists, that I think about him, that I do not carry hatred for him. I don't know if he receives these. I don't know if my mother passes them along. I don't know what is in his heart regarding me. I know from my mother that he is well. I know that he continues his work at the mosque. I know that the official story of what happened to me in our community has a version that is not the truth, but that protects the family's standing. I do not know if he prays for me. I hope he does. I pray for him. My father is not a simple person to hold in my heart. He is the person who named me Light, and wept when he held me, and taught me to love language, and sat with me in evenings, and built the world I came from. He is also the person who confined me, and called in scholars to correct me, and could not make room, in his love, for the person I actually am. Both of these things are true simultaneously. I have had to learn, am still learning, to hold both. My faith has given me a resource for this that I did not have before. The practice of forgiveness, not as a single event, but as a daily, ongoing choice. I choose every day not to harden toward my father, not because I am certain he will ever soften toward me, not because I expect a reconciliation in this lifetime, but because the alternative, bitterness, hardness, the slow calcification of grief into contempt, that alternative is a way of dying while you are still alive. And I choose life. Jesus said he came so that we might have life, and have it abundantly. I take that seriously. I take it personally. Abundant life does not include a hardened heart toward my father. Maybe someday. I don't know. Maybe the thread my mother holds will extend far enough to reach him. Maybe the God who runs down the road to meet returning children will work something in my father's heart that I cannot work myself. Maybe in 5 years, or 10 or 20, there will be a coffee shop somewhere, and a table and 2 cups of tea, and my father's hands around one of them. I hold that possibility gently, not as an expectation, as a prayer. I believe in the God who makes things possible that should not be possible. I have my own life as evidence for this. I will hold the impossible possibilities gently, and keep praying, and keep choosing life. I want to end by telling you what I think this story is really about, because I have been telling you events and feelings and details. But underneath all of that, there is something simpler. This story is about a girl who was given a name that meant light, and who spent 20 years looking for the source of that light in the places she was told to look and couldn't find it, and who one night, in the dark, in secret, in fear, looked somewhere she was told never to look, and found it there. That is the whole thing. The politics and the geography and the danger and the loss are all real and all matter, but underneath all of it is just that, a girl looking for light, finding it in the face of Jesus, paying what it costs to keep it, and discovering that what you find, when you find what is real, cannot be taken from you, not by isolation, not by a father's grief, not by 4 months of confinement, or 16 months of silence, or 4 years of distance. It cannot be taken. It is in you. He is in you. And he doesn't leave. I am Nour. I am 27 years old. I am a follower of Jesus Christ. I am a daughter who misses her father. I am a woman whose mother takes her hand across tables in coffee shops. I am a person who was named for light by a man who loved her. And I genuinely believe, that somewhere in all of this, in the places that cannot be seen yet, that name is being fulfilled in ways neither of us could have imagined. He knew what he was doing when he named me. He just didn't know whose light he was naming me for. Before I go, I want to ask you one thing. If this story gave you something today, if it touched something in you, if it made you feel less alone, if it made you think about something or someone you hadn't thought about in a while, please share it. Not for my sake. For the person on the other end of your share who might need it more than either of us knows. Subscribe to this channel. There are more stories coming, more voices, more people who paid real prices for real things and who are here to tell you, it is real. What we found is real, and it is available to anyone who reaches for it. And if you are one of the people I spoke to today, the woman in the dark with questions she cannot ask out loud, the family member who is afraid, the person who just wants to know if there is a God who is actually there, I want to say one last thing. He is there. He has been there the whole time, looking down the road, watching for you. And when he sees you, even from a great distance, even before you are close enough for anyone else to recognize you, he runs. My name is Nour al-Rashidi, and this is my testimony.